may please move along so we fill up all the seats, please, so that we don't have people standing on the back. That'd be great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our concurrent session on iconography and grace. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you Michael Gavolic, who will be leading our session this afternoon. Just a bit of information on Michael, as you probably read in your program. Michael was born in Belgrade in Yugoslavia, and he says he began his absorbing the ancient tradition of iconography in his early childhood. He is a graduate from the Belgrade Academy of Arts in 1974, studying painting, drawing, printmaking, among other subjects. He's travelled widely and lived in Spain, the Middle East, Africa, absorbing the contrasting beauty of each new culture, and in 1990 he came to Australia. He has had many shows in Australia and also in overseas, one-man shows in Peru, the United States, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Serbia, South Korea, Iceland, New Caledonia, France and Ecuador. One thing Michael did tell me this morning was that in 2008 he was commissioned to present an icon of St. Benedict to Pope Benedict. And that was done in 2008, and that is something he is most proud of, and something the Vatican had written to him, thanking him for the great effort he's done. His work, as you will see across the front here, is quite exquisite. So, on your behalf, and could you please welcome Michael to our conference.
Does it work now, all right? Small requirement, sounds maybe too strong. A little requirement to not use the overhead projections, to use kind of a big IT marvels and stuff like that, because of the nature of what we are talking about. The nature of it being completely individual, meditative, contemplative, private, silent, still, things like that. And in my experience, when we start dealing with the overhead projections and things like that, then we don't really know what to follow, either the voice of the presenter that much, or what he's saying, or the picture, the image, and maybe there are some other images around. But I also must add that I thought that there would be like much less interest in this thing, and I'm delighted to see such a huge presence and such a huge contrast as well. I might add to my last year's presentation in Queensland, far north Queensland, starting from Cairns. So something was wrong with the organization. So when I arrived there, to the Cathedral of St. Monica, there was bishop was there, and another priest, and a couple of other people, and that was it, in a huge cathedral. So sounded like daunting, but it's always like that. It starts very kind of slow and humble, and then other people come, and the power, I guess, of imagery displayed. If that power is there, then people are really kind of caught and wonder what is behind all this. And that is basically the topic, that's the point of this presentation, to shed some light on what is really an icon, and especially in my little endeavor, as opposed to religious art in general, because icons are lightly, loosely taken as simply just another form of religious art, and there are many reasons for that. However, it is only subject matter that unifies religious art and icons. All the rest is different. I'll talk about that at length. There were things mentioned today in the presentation by the bishop and by the Dr. Kathy Day, and the words like grace, gift of grace. I'm not going to enter the surfing kind of part. Maybe that kind of a surfing wave that never, in a way, reaches the shore is a point as a metaphor with what we are doing in general, that is not really about the end, the destination. It's about the journey itself. And the icons are definitely something called, amongst other things, the road less traveled, because very few people really in the world dedicate themselves fully, to the practice of that ancient tradition, and decide to kind of try the seemingly suicidal thing to live on that. And yes. I can say that I believe at least, that we are all touched by grace this way or another. Speaking of that, that we had encounters that we could recognize when they happened, or maybe not, maybe years later, maybe could decode them, understand them years later, or not. My own one was in my childhood, and it's all relevant to icons presentation, of course. Happened when I was around, I don't know, 6 years of age or something like that. I was in the south of my former homeland, and that area is was full of monasteries and churches from medieval times. We're talking 13th, 14th century, things like that. And you probably know that the Balkans area was invaded and dominated by Turks, by the Ottoman Empire for about 500 years in our case, like in the case of Yugoslavia or Serbia. So during that time, what is relevant for this story is the Turks would render, cover with mortar, many of those churches. In some cases, many cases, using knives and spiky objects to poke out the mortar existing frescoes, so that the new rendition, new mortar could fix better, adhere better. My parents were there, working there after the war, and my stepfather was a restorer of these churches and monasteries. So when they detached the mortar layer, they saw the wonderful image, fresco image, which is the icon image practically just on the wall, of Our Lady. I forgot which type of Our Lady it was, and it's completely irrelevant for the story. What is highly relevant and is totally unique in the history of world, I dare say, and you can check this statement, is that there was and there is still an Arabic inscription on that wall next to the fresco, or on the fresco itself. That inscription said in a Baroque, flamboyant Arabic way, these say, in a loose translation, these frescoes are as beautiful as the apple of my eye, or the apple of my eye is the cradle to your beauty, things like that. When Turkish army came to conquer also had Arabs as educated people and chroniclers of events. So obviously one such educated man came across a beauty, and that's the point of the story, came across grace from a completely different and opposing and adversary culture that they are basically dominating now. And he knew that in 5 minutes' time, kind of thing, that the whole wall will be covered, and for God knows what. In this particular case, we are talking 500 years, maybe 6. He could not resist but bowing to the beauty of another kind, to the eternal beauty that completely transcends the boundaries of what is this religion, what is another religion. I hasten to say that I also feel or felt like that, transcended when I was in fantastic Buddhist temples, when I was in some incredible mosques in Iraq. I haven't been to Isfahan to see that famous mosque, but I want to say, when you see the beauty and you know that those who built that beauty did not mean harm, they did not mean anything negative, they were talking about the transcendental, universal beauty that should unite us rather than differentiate. Anyway, so that much about that thing. Of course, I was a kid who absolutely did not understand anything of that, was actually even slightly frightened by those very austere Byzantine saints looking at you, making you feel sinful before you even started sinning, really. So that my interest in icon painting started at the age of, real interest and practice started late at the age of 18. That brings us to another little definition and the necessary clarification that we need for this talk. And that is, what is iconography? Literally translated, it is, as you know from the Greek language, icon writing, but also icon drawing. So much is made about that icon writers basically write icons instead of paint them, and basically it goes down to painting of icons. Where is that writing thing comes as a very important theological statement is that in the old days, Gospels, Scriptures, Apocrypha, and everything else has been done by a relatively small number of people, erudites, educated people who knew to write and who were wise enough to give us certain ancient wisdom and the new message. So not everybody could understand these things. Not everybody could read. So there were many analphabets. So icon painting was another way to back up the liturgy, still is, and also the Gospels. It would be as if like writing Gospels, but in colors. So some theologians, like Russian theologians, call icon painting like theology in colors. Still, it's not good enough to say that because colors are just one part of the symbolism that we are going to unravel here. And because we have the shapes and the distortion of the reality of this world that we are going to talk about, which is actually the core of what icons are about. So what really makes icons completely different from other religious paintings of times old and new today is that the so-called, if I can just simplify it a little bit, so say Western art tends to depict things as if they are happening or they happen on a human level, like this kind of realm, worldly realm. So when you see the imagery of Christ suffering on the cross, it's always very dramatic and very engaging. You see the man suffering, and that's fine. But what icons try to do is to depict another reality completely. What happens afterwards when we become, well, first of all, the protagonists of the Christian drama become saints, become sanctified, go to some other place. The beautiful Chinese proverb says, you can paint the sea, but you cannot paint the sound of waves. You can paint the forest, but you cannot ever paint the sound of breeze, the roaring wind through the branches, whatever of that sort. You can paint the man, but you cannot paint his soul. Well, that's precisely what icons try to do. So they are giving us a stylized, deliberately, intentionally distorted version of this reality to tell us that after this world there is another realm that we're all, hopefully, as Christians, aspiring to. Therefore, icons are called the window to the kingdom, the window to the heavenly kingdom, and things like that, because in all churches, Orthodox churches at least, you have the screen with icons called iconostasis, and icons are all there to, as I said, back up the liturgy in the first place, but to bring closer to us the mystery of God and the events of Christian drama, but with their oddity and the different everything, anatomy, landscapes, architecture, they are already preparing us to that other kingdom to come yet. So they're completely disinterested whether, Christ was to be depicted or his contemporaries like this or like that, in a sense trying to be very pedantic and finicky according to some researches how people of that era looked like. There are some other types of prescriptions that tell us how do we really paint Christ, Mary, and all saints and all protagonists of the Gospels. So let us say a little bit now immediately about the chromatic symbolism. This particular icon is the icon of Christ, the Good Shepherd, but without the lamb, he could also be depicted the same way, chromatically, color-wise, with a book and blessing and all that, and then he would be Christ the Pantocrator or Pantocrator or ruler of all. In this kind of depiction, we see that Christ has the undergarment, which is color red or brown, could be also brown. That stands for his, firstly, divine nature. The other one, the cloak on top, is blue or green, standing for his human nature. Just by doing this, juxtaposing these two colors, we are entering the alphabet, basically, the beginning of the alphabet of icon painting, having made a theological statement. His facial features, as I said, are very carefully done as per prescriptions that we have, like a thin nose, standing for nobility, the wise, or the forehead suggesting the wisdom, kind of a compassionate, merciful look, but which also should hopefully reveal some firmness of somebody who really doesn't allow things that are not in line with what we want. The lips are always tightly closed in icon painting. They're never, the icons, meaning the saints, are never smiling or something like that. There are always people who say, but why? If only Mary would smile a little bit, I would buy you this. So I lost a number of clients like that. The chlamys, the shoulder band, is the heritage from the ancient Roman times. So what are icons basically also are the culmination, if you want, of different traditions. The prerequisites for icons to come to the scene were made before Christianity actually started existing. In ancient Egypt, in ancient Greece, in Mesopotamia, even in the Jewish tradition, etc., and so forth. So this is coming from as a sign of patriciate or nobility, you like, etc. and so forth. All icons disregarding of saints, events from Christianity, irrespective of how they might look like clear to us, like this is Last Supper, why would you need to kind of write it? They all have inscription. So in this particular case, for Christ, we have the initials, Jesus Christos. These initials, in case of Jesus Christ, Jesus Christos, and with Mary that I'm going to show now in a second, are always done in the Byzantine Greek, and they do not have the equivalent in other languages. So we may decide to, by the way, inscriptions traditionally in icons are Byzantine Greek, Old Slavic or Slavonic, and Arabic, very little, because in those days when apostles were spreading Christianity, these were the countries that Arabs lived, etc. But we can these days engage into the Latin, English, if you like, and stuff like this. But the initials that I'm talking about have to be in this way, always, invariably. Now, there is a bit of a esoteric kind of touch to it, as icons are completely esoteric. So they do have hidden meanings, and to unravel them, we have to have keys really to understand them, to approach them. Otherwise, they just do look like a beautiful, maybe beautiful, hopefully beautiful paintings, and that's fine. And that's what I was toying with for 20 years. I absolutely tried to if you want, separate, to divorce icons from the theological background, which was completely contrary to the sense, to what it is about. An icon cannot exist outside of the theological background. It is just simply a theological statement. When Moses asked God, and you, who are you? So we know that the answer was, I am who I am, or I am who is, or I am that is, different translations. In the Greek translation of the Bible, it is I, the being. So only in the halo of Christ is the sign that can go within his halo. So on means I, the being, or I am who I am, because the name of God is never, as we know, pronounced, and we can just have some substitutes. But so I'm God in a sense. I am the representative of my Father, who is God. Let us immediately pass to another example of Mary with child Jesus, or how Orthodox people would like to call her Most Holy Virgin. And so you don't just say Mary. I was running some classes for years in Sydney. There was this Greek priest there. I got reprimanded very heavily because I called her Mary. He says, your girlfriend can be called Mary, but not. So I was happy that when he left. So with Mary, we have, because that's how we call her in the Western tradition, that's how we call her here in Australia, and we do that with utmost respect anyway. It's a question of respect, not just a superficial and superfluous addressing. We have completed the reverse situation as to the chromatic symbolism. Remember Christ's thing with colors? Here is directly the opposite. The first garment, undergarment, in Mary's case is blue or green, wanting to say that she was primarily a human. She was an ordinary, simple woman before she was a bearer of Christ, because that's what she was in the Greek language. Theotokos. Theotokos is another name, which is a Greek name, but used also in the Western tradition as well. You see it in books, and literally it means the bringer of God. So Mary is depicted with the red cloak or brown cloak, or a cloak with brown or red highlights, called maphorion or omophorion, is the sign of her, if you like, royalty or special status. The tassels or fringes are a little bit of a sign of some sort of differentiation from otherwise quite simplistic, monastic almost approach. Her robes are never so, how would I say, lavish and ornate like they are in the Renaissance painting or Flemish painting or something like that, where painters pay much more attention to robes, drapes, folds, and mesmerizing effects of total skillfulness. This is something else in question. She invariably, in this particular type of icon of Mary with Child Jesus, which is called in the West Our Lady of Perpetual Help, as we know, but in the East, where it originated in the 14th century, it was called, and still is called, Our Lady of the Passion, because Christ, child or infant, had a vision of his future passion. So two angels carrying the tools of his passion, thus making the child being frightened. So he kind of moves away from his mother, like he's not looking at his mother at all in this particular case, moving away from angels. She, meanwhile, invariably has a very sad, concerned looks, and it is always like that. Because theologically, she, even in other examples that I'm going to show in a moment, in the so-called Virgin of Tenderness type, she always thinks of her son's future passion and is concerned about it. So therefore, she assumes not only the passion of her son, but the passion of all mankind. And that's why we pray to her for help. That's why she was called Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and still is, very firmly in the West. The symbolism, there are 3 stars on her maphorion, or cloak, if you like. Always, invariably, with a child or without a child, stands for her virginity before, during, and after the conception and the birth of child. The child can have either red sash or belt, rather, usually red. That stands for the passion. Red in general stands for divinity, stands for martyrdom. We'll see in some icons of some artists. But also stands for resurrection. Later you can have a look at the Christ type of icon there, called the bridegroom of the church. The redness of his gown or garment is deliberate. It's a color of resurrection. What else do we need? Yes, the letters, the initials here that we mentioned just before, are in Greek language Mitera Theo, or Miter Theo, Mother of God. So, as I said, some other kind of a title, if you like, because sometimes those types of icons of Mary have titles, meaning that we write as an inscription, can be in any language, but this has to be the way I'm showing now. So, when we are on that, I guess you would ask, what are the others? Just grab this other. What are the other types of icons of Mary? There are too many to talk about. I'll just give you one example. A famous, either Our Lady of Vladimir, but much more important for our talk, Our Lady of Tenderness. The subtype would be Our Lady of Sweet Embrace, but anyway, so the child here, obviously, is very humanly presented, depicted as an affectionate child who just simply wants to play. So he even puts one of his arms around her neck. Yet, she's always, as I said, she looks away from him, she's always concerned. That is very, very different theology than any kind of Renaissance, not to talk about these days today, but I mean, Renaissance paintings where basically the models for Mary and other protagonists, as I said, of Christian drama, would be taken from life, from the family, from the neighborhood, from street. In cases of Caravaggio, I dare say even from brothels. So there are people who object to veneration of such depictions. So something to do with the icons of Mary. Before we forget, because I tend to do that very much. This is an icon of Saint Luke. Saint Luke, the iconographer. He is a patron saint of all artists, especially iconographers. Later, of course, also writers, also butchers, because his zoographic symbol or sign is ox or calf. As you probably know, all evangelists have those symbols. So here he is the first, according to the strong belief, the first person to have painted an icon of Mary with child Jesus. According to Greeks, and I hope firmly that there are no Greeks here to reprimand me again for what I'm saying, if you just hear from any Greek person about this situation, they will tell you, yes, in my village or a village I know or something, there are three icons by St. Luke of Mary. Some say 16, so the numbers are going fantastic. It's just really touching. But this type of icon is called, what is important for our story, Hodigitria, or Hodigitria in the Greek language. It means she who points the way. It is a typical theological icon, so-called dogmatic icon, wherein there is nothing, absolutely nothing motherly, nothing affectionate there. She's just holding her child on one hand and showing, pointing to him with another hand and arm, saying, he is the king. She brought the king. She is the vessel. She's just there to present us the king. And Christ, of course, as infant, is always invariably depicted with an adult face, as we know. It's another kind of oddity. While, as opposed to the Italian Renaissance and the other medieval paintings, wherein the little Christ were exactly like angels, chubby, rosy cheeks, little healthy, very healthy infants and stuff like that. But this is not the case. He has the adult imagery and blessing sign. The scroll is bringing his divine message to the world. That is very important for us. Now, as to what I was talking about, the distortion, if you remember, of everything, of all this kind of reality. I was talking anatomy in the first place. So when we see all of these icons, later you can have a look. Actually, I would like you very much to have a look from close. By the way, icons are supposed to be kind of looked up at, not just down, but in a way, this is what we have as a facility, but doesn't matter. It also makes you kind of lower yourself and then brings you closer to examine the details, etc. This is the case of landscape, of architecture. The architecture is imaginary, fictitious, and if certain saint is depicted in front of some sort of architecture, some buildings, it means that the event took place in an enclosed space. And it is never depicted in icon painting as such, as I said, in the enclosed space, because it will fall to the trap of this world rules of perspective, foreshortening, and things like that. It just wants to transcend and get away from that. That fictitious imaginary architecture in this particular case involves two towers which have red drape, mainly it's red, color red, which is stretched between the two towers. That means a couple of things. One is the barrier between this world and the heavenly world, and the other one, it talks about the presence of God in the image. Now, we can see the blackness, the black apertures, the black holes, like where the windows are supposed to be, maybe some doors and things like that. They do exist in the landscapes as well as caves, and I'll show it now when I'm pointing to the icon of St. George and the dragon. And they are absolutely, I dare say again, use the word esoteric, which is otherwise a bit iffy as a word. So that word, that usage tells tells us about the chaos and the confusion before the light of revelation. It is a stunning theological statement as well. You just don't see it in other religious painting, and especially not of paintings of today. So St. Luke, we have obviously prescriptions. How can we paint a saint? St. Luke can be depicted as an icon painter, so saint of artist. Can be depicted as a healer because he was a physician as well as a healer, so patron saint of doctors, nurses, dentists, and things like that. And with his zoographic symbol, as I said, wing, ox or calf next to him. And the third one, disregarding the order, is he as an evangelist, usually half-figured, holding the gospel here. So these are those depictions that we have to abide by. So icons are used to bring us closer with all that oddity, the mystery of God. Because if you depict things in a like too predictable, realistic, expectable human level, in a way there is no mystery. You can come up with a fantastic painting, but the mystery lies in precisely distorting what I have just said. So they are backup to the liturgy, they can be used in processions, and above all, they can be used and are used for the personal devotion, very much. So they are a contemplative device, they are a meditative device. John, you hear me? We did not talk much about Christian meditation in general until now, I guess. Somehow meditation was sort of looked like the property of Asia, Orient, and things like that. Be it Buddhist, be it Sufi, be it whatever. But actually there is an incredibly strong tradition in the Christian monastic heritage that we should kind of revive and start to use. Icons are ideal focal points for any kind of, either if you like, group guided meditation, and especially of a personal one. A number of meditation groups ask me for icons so that they use it for those purposes. What do icons draw on? They draw on scriptures, which is normal, mainly. They draw on apocrypha in certain cases, and we are going to show that in a moment. And sometimes they draw on Christian mythology. So for the scriptures we know, for apocrypha, let's see what do we mean by that. Before I pass to the apocryphal part, this is an example of an icon of what we in the West call the Last Supper, but in the East is called the Mystical Supper, mystical supper, because the disciples were initiated during the supper. That was the emphatic fact that mattered, rather than the fact that it was the last meal that they had. Anyway, I'm just explaining the difference even in the traditions. So here we have this is just a photographic reproduction of a big icon that I have done. It's now in Melbourne. We have the whiteness of the cloth. That is unusual. That is just simply my own invention, leading us to the figure of Christ with Eucharistic chalice and things like that. But that basically, whiteness of the cloth is also a relation, a connectedness to the loincloth of his future passion on the cross. So that is also an important part. They are all there. They all have to be painted the same way, meaning the same color is used for all their faces. Christ, and is it like two figures on an icon, or 20 or 30? They all have to have the same color. Now, again, another little possibility to talk about the differentiation. When Leonardo da Vinci, the greatest of masters of all times, maybe, painted his Last Supper. Now we got explanations. We get kind of a decoding of a Da Vinci Code. We have Mary Magdalene. We have all sorts of things. That's fine. I'm not going to enter there. But what happens is that is precisely the difference between art and, be it religious or not, and icons. In icons, we cannot do things we feel like individually. So, for instance, I have my personal doubts about Judas and his situation in the whole, if you like, outcome. But that is completely irrelevant. If I decide to paint something and call it an icon, I have to paint him halo-less, without the halo, in full profile, reaching for the bread. In the Orthodox tradition, not having a halo means simply, well, they say, Greek theologians, profile is absence and absence is seen. Every icon, person on an icon has to communicate with us, with the viewers, with two eyes, whether, with both eyes, whether the saint is in 3/4 profile or something like that, still we have to see both of those eyes. When we do not see, when it is just a profile, then it is either the person is not a saint or is obviously castigated or branded the way Judas is in the tradition anyway, in the virtue of sanctity. The mystical situation of the red drapes is again very present, very powerful and things like that. So this is just another option. You see the blackness of openings there or apertures, again the chaos and confusion before the light of revelation. I forgot to say that amongst other things, there are too many things that we can say about icons. Those talks, exhaustive talks and exhausting talks last 3 to 4 hours. So we'll just simply do what we can and very quickly maybe wrap it up only because of your questions, because I believe that you might have very interesting questions which will shed more light to us. So I was mentioning the Apocrypha and Christian mythology. I'll get to Apocrypha from my book. There are saints who are completely fictitious, and I don't see any problem in us saying that openly. One of them is Saint Christopher. Christopher, again, semantically, it means God's carrier, somebody who carries God. Now, in this particular depiction, he's a patron saint of travelers and things like that, so that he is a very present saint in the Christian, if you like, edifice. Why is he depicted like this? Short answer, absolutely no one has a clue. Here is the short text telling you possible theories, conspiracy theories. So that he belonged to the tribe somewhere at the end of the world, and in those days the people believed in creatures like that had all sorts of different animalistic properties, stuff like that. It is very possible that he is a direct progression from the Egyptian god Anubis, and that's most likely a possibility. One Catholic priest, however, they've said that too, told me the story. He says Saint Christopher actually was a very handsome man. He attracted a lot of ladies. He was known for that, and he didn't want that. So he had too much attention, and yet he wanted to devote himself to the spiritual life, and he couldn't because of that attention. He asked God, he pleaded to do something about it, to help him, and so God gave him the dog's head and solved the problem. So things you hear from priests. I'll have another one maybe from another priest. But that's great. This is the figure, very important for us as a teaching tool, if you like. A wonderful imagery of Saint George slaying a dragon, or Saint George and the dragon, because basically he, even in those so many variations, he actually never killed the dragon. It wasn't the point. He tamed the dragon and took it on a leash and took it to the town where kind of poor people were terrorized by the beast for years and all those things. Now, whether Saint George, I hope this doesn't sound blasphemous, really existed or not, because we are in trouble with historical foundations, as I said, for many saints. Most probably yes, and we know that he was some sort of a soldier, professional soldier in the Roman army. He was a commander, by the way. So whether that unit was, now just before I continue, you can check me out on this. So try to read on St. George wherever you can. So you will see, if you read 50 or 250 stories, they will all differ, at least slightly. So in some, he will be a commander of 100 people unit, some 1,000, whatever. That's not important for the story. The importance is that he basically became secretly a devout Christian, and when the emperor, who was his superior, asked him to bow to gods after a victorious battle, he denied, he refused, and that's why he was executed, to kind of just give you a short line. And hence, he is called the Great Martyr, St. George the Great Martyr, and therefore we have the color red cloak always invariably when St. George is depicted as a symbol of martyrdom. Whether like St. George can be depicted as a warrior, standing half-figured with warrior's attributes, but this is the part with the dragon that I dare say is a typical mythology, because in all cultures and traditions before Christianity, we did have a situation where a man conquers evil, and that's all fine. What is the relevance for us from the Christian point of view? That's very important. Now, the Christian church, Christianity, explains the event like this. They say, yes, he did tame the dragon, but on top of his lance, well, this is an old icon, so you can't see from where you are, there is always a cross. He could not have done that with his own man-human powers. He was helped by divine intervention to do that. And so that is one point. Another point is that you will see a stunning situation with the icons of St. George on a horse, as opposed to all other depictions in the Western art. In the Western art, again, as I said, we dwell on humanity. So the depictions of St. George will be of somebody very like tense, trying hard to kill the beast and dominate and be victorious, which is only normal. And the beast will be fighting back, and it will be all very kind of ferocious and a lot of blood around and stuff like that. Now, in icon depictions, both Knight George and the beast, the dragon, are serene. They even, in many depictions, look at each other with a sense of recognition. It is the recognition of somebody who knows that the dominating power, the superior power, came to dominate, the new master came, and there is no problem about that. So even the horse, sometimes it is usually the white charger, sometimes very lovingly looks at the master because they are in unity, and they are both like working towards one noble kind of goal. Very often in the background you will see the castle, emperor and his wife, empress and princess. So it is thought that emperor and the empress are Constantine and Helen, and the princess is basically the young Christian church. So that's how, and symbolism doesn't stop there. It is absolutely stunning. We have three levels of something deep here in this depiction, in any depiction of St. George and the dragon. We have the level, like a realistic, so to say, level of our realm, human realm, which is the knight on a horse with a dragon. We have the superior level of God, wherein just God's hand protrudes from the divine realm. This is as much as we can see from God, so to say. The depictions of God the Father are basically banned. Of course they have been done, and of course I have done it. I am hired to do that, but just once to just do that. Normally the depiction of God the Father are not welcome in any tradition of Christianity. That's the superior level. And there is this subterranean inferior level that some may interpret as a Hades or not. It doesn't really matter. It's just simply the lower energies, the underground energies, etc. and so forth. We do not have that in the Western depictions. Yes, we have to start taking the questions. Yes. I just briefly wanted to tell you it is absolutely impossible that the icons, there is no definition about what icons are, strangely enough. The closest one is that they are sacred art. I came up after over 40 years of doing it with my own little definition that is sacred through art. So there is a lot of art, a lot of craft, a lot of technical involved in icon making, but it is just all in order to convey a certain message and not end in itself. So for instance, my depictions of crucifixion that I keep doing for decades, it's just one example of my own artistic manifestation of what I want to do. This is like an allusion to the September 11th, how the firefighters in the rubble find the baby Jesus being born. That's fine, that's art. And then I can proudly sign myself, or not proudly, but I sign myself on the front. Icons we do not normally sign at all. We just write at the back the title of the icon, who did it, and the year. Because it is completely irrelevant who I am for the tradition. I'm supposed to perpetuate the tradition. Of course, I bring a little bit of myself, but that's what I will say is a huge difference from art. Any questions, please, would probably help. Yes. Yes, we use pure gold leaf, as you would imagine, for the background, for halos. It's 8 centimeters gold leaf, 22, 23, 24 carats. When we are talking highlights or fine lines on top of some garments or whatever objects maybe, we use the gold in powder. Mica. That's the part of the story. Normally, we do not paint on gold. It is not necessary. We put gold around. We have to know in advance where we are going with all this. So we put the gold around the area that we want to paint. Sometimes, however, we do paint on gold directly. This is very difficult because gold is metal and rejected to tempera. All icons, by the way, are done with tempera, not acrylics, not oil. So tempera is the oldest and very efficient medium, which was primary medium for art anywhere in the world until the 15th century when the oil, well, some were along the line, when oil painting was discovered. Somebody was, yes. No, absolutely not. I have here, this is the example of Mary MacKillop. I have done 5 or 6 different versions of Mary. That's an example of a miniature icon of Mary MacKillop. But I go up to 2 meters for churches. That's pretty much the end of it. I mean, anything above 2 meters is too heavy, and then you just simply paint on the wall. But yes, up to 2 meters. Mostly 1 meter by 70 or something. No restriction, just depending on the use. Like it's your personal devotion, or goes to the church, or a school foyer, or something like that. I'm having an exhibition now in Brisbane on Friday, okay? So I have A3 size explanation of all icons that I will be displaying, but that's just that. But if somebody, you mean, acquire an icon from me, then I can give an explanation. That's all I can, if I can understand.
But what I'm saying is, the more that you know about
Ah.
messages of icons, the more able you are to interpret.
Oh, yes, yes. No, no. I mean, of course, naturally, along the line, you always come across things that you don't know, never heard about. So, for instance, some saint, absolutely, I never heard of Sir Oliver Plunkett got to make an icon. Of course, you do the research. I'll give you a very good example if I have that much time. Excellent example for that for the audience, not for your question. There is a church of Saint Finbar in New South Wales, Blue Mountains. So they asked me to paint Saint Finbar, create an icon of Saint Finbar, who is very important, as you know, for the Ireland, for the Irish. So in one of so I got text, some material from a priest, some from somebody else, from the internet, whatever. I had 4 different versions of Saint Finbar. Luckily, I read them all. And in one of them, I heard that he had a friend, like a soulmate, another kind of monk, who he was inseparable with. So when the time has come for God to take Finbar to him from this world, he already actually started doing it. Took him by one hand, by one arm, and started pulling up, the story says. That friend said, oh, yes, I mean, of course, it's up to you, but could you please leave him a little bit more with us, you know? So God let go. Finbar stayed amongst the living, yet his hand radiated always, at all times. So he had to put the glove there. So even the priest of that church didn't know about that, and he was delighted, and the parishioners were delighted because it's something that they just simply didn't know. So that's, you have to do the research. Absolutely, you have to know what you're doing. You can't paint an icon without knowing what you're doing. It's not an icon then.
Sorry, we'll have to leave it there. I don't know about yourself, but I'm just in awe when you hear like Michael present on something that they have so much talent and knowledge about. It's truly great to listen to you today, Michael. Fantastic. Yesterday we were sitting in here for a staff meeting getting ready for today, and Ernie was talking about, oh, it'd be nice if we could buy a nice icon for the Catholic Education Office. I thought, oh, that one looks nice. It was worth 10,000. So you can imagine how my suggestion went after that. But Michael does have some prints and cards and books over the side here if you'd like to have a look at those and purchase any if you wish. There's also a book there. If you have a question, you can write the question in the book and just some contact details, and Michael has promised that he will.
Or a comment on this display, or if you wish to be included in further events like exhibitions or something like that, maybe your contact, like email address or whatever. If you like, the book is there.
Surely I think we've just had a moment of grace, so we might say thank you